firstly, Julie, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your piece and what led you to writing it?
I'm sure. Hi everyone. Thank you. I kind of was inspired, I guess, by the freedom that came with the commission for the piece. So there's 31 authors in this, six from the UK in this new edition, and the editor, Jenna, when she reached out said, you know, if you would write for us, we would only request that you write about your experience of being autistic. That's the only requirements. That's pretty wide open. And I think I had spent the last few years kind of in quite a serious professional capacity fighting for disability rights and justice and working on the inclusion guide, and was feeling a bit tired, and this kind of gave me the freedom to say to myself, okay, I'm gonna play, I'm gonna go to a space of joy, you know. And I think that I kind of felt like in wider society being autistic and being joyful are kind of mutually exclusive, which is really wrong and damaging, and I kind of wanted to go to a place that was fun for me. So my essay is called Stargazing, and it's called that because I'm obsessed with looking at the stars, and I just kind of wanted to sort of explore in more depth than I ever had my connection with the stars. Like, why do I love looking at them? Like, what is it about them that's so kind of compelling to me? And I think there was an element of the essay does look at grief, autistic grief, the grief that everyone can connect with. And that's because I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and he was the one that taught me how to navigate the night sky, because he was a seafarer, so he worked in the Merchant Navy in the 70s, and part of his job was standing for hours at a time on the bridge of these enormous ships, these cargo vessels travelling around the world, and he would use a sextant to measure the distance between the stars so that he could then chart the passage of the ships across the planet, essentially. And it was really cool as a kid to be told by your dad, hey, there's a map up there, all you need to do is learn how to read it. It just really excited me. So it was something that was a really strong connection with my dad.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I just love your piece. It's so beautiful, and I'm really looking forward to talking more about it. Would you be happy to share a little bit from it just now to read for us? Thank you.
So in this reading, I'm kind of pulling on the emotional threads that kind of carry through the essay. There are some really nice visual descriptions. I just want to say that. Please enjoy those in your own time. And standing in his garden for hours at a time in the depth of a Scottish winter, no for weaklings, teaching his young daughter how to recognise the patterns in the stars, and the ancient stories strung between them. He'd already taught me how to use a compass and the sun to navigate my way over land during the day. I'd known for some time already the coordinates of our home, 56 degrees north, 4 degrees west, a measurement of latitude and longitude used by seafarers to chart their course at sea. My vivid imagination allowed me to easily project a gradually deepening 3D map of the celestial sphere out from my body and into the sky any time I wanted. These quiet conversations under the stars with my dad made me feel seen and special. He got just as cold as I did, shivering in the dark but ignoring it and pointing out the International Space Station and various satellites anyway. I banked it all in my head. This was knowledge I would never relinquish, but build upon. When I was 13, my dad gifted me Stephen Hawking's The Universe in a Nutshell, and theoretical physics became my jam. I lived in a world of theory, not absolution, where anything was possible and much was still unknown. A few years later, I was lucky to study astronomy and the cosmos in my first couple of years at university, and I revelled in calculating the rate of expansion of the universe, the parsec leaps between stars, and in wrapping my head around Schrodinger's paradox. It blew my mind to learn that those same quantum particles that make our planet, our sun, our solar system and galaxy make up the very cells and atoms of us, of me and my consciousness. All of it, the universe and me, just quarks, gluons, mesons, electrons, stuck together in infinitely chaotic and complex ways. Exquisite, perfect. To know this is to wonder. This all-encompassing, whole body awe at the mysterious things that lie beyond our own world is my most deeply joyous stim. It reverberates from my crown all the way to my toes, a pulsing celestial glow that fills up my cells and which stays with me for days or even years. Banked in an internal library that I can revisit at any time, pulling a jar from the shelf and shaking up pink moon dust from 2019's Super Blood Wolf Moon, when I hung out over the balcony of my living room window in my pyjamas in sub-zero temperatures, while I squealed with delight to see the rosy orb of the giant moon slowly turning blood red. I once stood at the edge of the Grand Canyon, knowing that I wanted to pocket the moment forever, a wee grounding stone to pull out in tough times. I crouched down and gathered a handful of red dust from the ground, letting it slowly trickle through my fingers in the breeze as I mentally tiled the inside of my brain with the bronze sunset unfolding in front of me, combining the power of my senses. Every time I stargaze, I'm repeating that moment, deliberately reinforcing my connection to it, the earth and myself, regulating my nervous system. I'm recording the sharpness of blue-white stars against the softness of the orange ones, all the constellations in contrast. It's a joy because being autistic makes me a navigator. I know as well as my own skin how the sun charts her voyage across the sky through the year and where the cardinal directions are. I can spot the plough in a heartbeat, and I know that Polaris can be found by simply extending an imaginary line up from the two stars at the front of the plough, so that I'm never lost. I'm a voyager without ever leaving the ground. It's who I am. I've learned from my own experience of life and from the people in it that pain can become our whole entire world. Every time I set my eyes on some distant star cluster or nebula, I'm doing the impossible. I'm climbing outside of myself and I'm flying, soaring way above the clouds, piercing little holes in the sky. I'm a voyager out of inherent curiosity, but I'm saving myself every time I look up. Every moon gleamed, cluster devoured, every galaxy spied transports me right back to my childhood garden, my dad's solid, soothing presence by my side. I scoop myself round and pick up what diamonds I can in my feeble, human, Occam obliterating hope that the molecules of him might be seeing them too, somewhere out there in the great, infinite multiverse where our own story is now strung between the stars, just out of reach. We are all of us the sum of our parts, but we are so much more than that. We are stardust.
Thank you so much, Julie, for giving us a sense of stargazing. And I just want to take a moment to really appreciate your outfit as well and how you've really dressed according to your piece as well, which I think is such a beautiful example of autistic joy. So thank you so much for that. Fergus, would you be able to tell us a little bit about your piece and what kind of led to you writing it, Monotropic Superdrive at Home?
Yeah, so I lost my mum a few years ago as well, 4 years ago now, and there's a certain kind of parallel in between our pieces, in the sense that I think we both kind of felt seen by our parents, and accepted and known, and they gave us sort of joys that we've taken with us for life. So my mum, Diana Murray, worked with autistic people for the last 30 odd years of her life, having developed a theory of autism in the early 1990s, and sort of set out to see if it held up when she actually met a lot of autistic people. It was another 10 years before she realised she was autistic herself, which was around about the same time as me. So, yeah, I wanted to talk about sort of what I got from growing up in a family like that, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that's something which comes across so much in the piece, and I have to say I was a little, it made me feel really sort of emotional to be able to read that actually other people did grow up in autistic or having families, and to know that that existed. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. And would you be happy to share a little bit and read for us now from your piece?
Edited extracts. I realised I was weird when I was pretty young. Other kids kept telling me so. I expressed myself weirdly, I reacted weirdly, I occupied myself doing weird things. I had no interest in team sports and often struggled to join in with other games. If I was raised in a different family, this might have been a real blow to my self-esteem. But my mum, Diana Murray, had long since come to terms with her own weirdness, and neither of my brothers seemed particularly concerned with being seen as normal. When I thought about it, all of my favourite characters from stories, fictional or historical, also seemed to be pretty weird. Very often, they were bullied for it too. So I learned to take weird as a compliment, or at worst, a neutral observation. If someone thought it was an insult, they'd obviously misunderstood something very basic about the world. All the most interesting people are weirdos. Like many unidentified autistic kids who don't grow up hating themselves, I took pride in what I could do, and decided that caring about the things I struggled with was silly. Who wants to be seen as normal? So, my mother was best known for developing the theory of monotropism together with Mike Lesser and Mendelssohn. It also comes up in a couple of other chapters in the book. In short, monotropic people concentrate attention and other processing resources on relatively few things at a time. Interests, concerns, or filters. We have a tendency to become deeply absorbed. We enter attention tunnels and often miss things outside them, or else experience them as deeply uncomfortable intrusions. It usually takes time to enter and exit attention tunnels comfortably, but it is possible to build up complex interests which allow us to bounce around rapidly within a single attention tunnel. Getting good at anything, for us, usually depends on it capturing our interest and becoming a target of our monotropic superdrive, leading to the spiky profile of skills so common in autistic people. As important as I think the theory is, I suspect Dinah would have agreed with Marx when he wrote, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." This would help explain why she never finished the book that she'd been commissioned to write based on her PhD thesis. What had started out as a chapter for that, titled Holy Fools and Bullshit Artists, became her main professional focus for life. In the early days of the internet, she started a small organisation with Mike Lesser called Autism and Computing. They promoted and enabled autistic people's access to information technology, explaining why computers suited people who processed the world monotropically. Dinah made friends with many autistic people, as well as parents, professionals, and made a habit of connecting them with each other. She worked to ensure that autistic people were taken seriously and listened to by professionals and policymakers at a time when this very rarely happened. For the next generation, I want all people to have what I had growing up. Firstly, weird pride, the knowledge that being different doesn't make you inferior, and that weirdness is very often a net positive for society. I have to credit my mum for the term, as well as my own pride in the things that make me weird. She made herself a weird pride badge to wear to official functions and other autism-related events, as well as day-to-day life. I declared the 4th of March to be Weird Pride Day in 2021, partly in her honour, when she had advanced pancreatic cancer, and it's been celebrated ever since. Secondly, opportunities to pursue their interests and do whatever else they need to gain some sense of peace and purpose in this disorienting world. I see it as a sign of something wrong with society that having special interests, intense focuses, passions, is regularly interpreted as a symptom. Thirdly, chances to connect with other people who experience the world differently from most. It can be intensely meaningful to connect with other people who share your passions, or people who have always felt like outsiders for whatever reason. But I am thinking here particularly of other autistic people. Autistic community has been an established thing since the early 1990s, often making such connections far easier to access and creating opportunities for people to share vital insights about what it means to be different in this way and how to make the most of it. It's a crime that so many autistic people still don't get the chance to be a part of that.
Thank you so much, Fergus, and I think that line that you ended on there is just so true. And I'm wondering, I think something that you mentioned that comes up really strongly in both your pieces is family who are artistic or affirming in different ways, and also special interests actually being a way to connect with other people as well. And I'm wondering, was it something that for you, Fergus, did you realise that other families weren't as autistic affirming as yours, or was that a bit of a shock when you came to realise that this is perhaps all too unusual an experience?
So it's difficult to know where to start with that, because I didn't realise I was autistic until I was about 13. So I'd grown up in this weirdness affirming environment, actually. You know, my mum started like learning about autism and working on autism when I was about 13, I think. But like I say, it was another 10 years or so before either of us really connected to that with ourselves. So I knew that we grew up in an unusual family. You know, that was pretty clear. Although I mean, there are a lot of pretty weird families out there. So, you know, it was unusual in some ways, but not so much in others.
Yeah, it's sort of reminding me of those memes, I don't know if anyone's seen them, where it's like, you know, when you're going home at Christmas and perhaps your parent doesn't know they're neurodivergent, they're like, you can't possibly be neurodivergent, says like the parent who can only use one spoon out of the cutlery set. That's kind of what it's reminding me of. But I think what's really interesting about both your pieces then is there's this affirmation and sense of really feeling seen, even if you don't have the language or the framework of autism, and it's not necessarily, the language doesn't necessarily need to be there to be able to provide that sense of support. And I wondered if you could say something about how your special interest obviously connected you with your dad and helped you kind of reach out and make that relationship with your dad, because I think something that is, you know, very stigmatized around autistic people is, as you say, that special interests are kind of seen as a symptom, Fergus, and yet they can be something that's both so enriching for us but also our relationships with other people.
Yeah, I mean it's funny because I knew we were weird as well, but I'm like late diagnosed. I only found out that I'm autistic about 5 years ago, and I'm 39 now, and I'm the first in my family as well. So there's that, you know, question of, like Elspeth saying, you look at your parents and you go, oh well, that makes a lot of sense, you know. I kind of have a sort of agoraphobic mum who really struggles socially and with mental health, and you know, like I've mentioned this connection to my dad with the stargazing, but you know, we had that with music as well. My dad was kind of, I don't know, maybe Fergus, there's a word for this that I don't know, but my dad was kind of a collector. He had to like own things, so he had thousands of albums, like, and this was like LPs, this was vinyls, and then it became CDs, and then when we started streaming, my dad would rip it and be like, you know, kind of doing it dodgily, I shouldn't really say that, but he had to like own the music. And he was, you know, he was a smart guy, obviously, like he was navigating these big ships from quite a young age and for a long time, and he had these hyper focuses of interest, and my mum was very creative, so I'm kind of both of them. Like I'm a scientist and I'm an artist as well, and you know, I kind of look at them both and think, I think there's neurodivergence on both sides, but we knew that we were weird. We were, you know, described all of us individually as oddballs, or quirky is the word that got thrown at me a lot. I think that's maybe common for females, I'm not sure. But we were kind of happy in our unit, and we knew that we functioned well together, and that was the place where you would come home after maybe, you know, I was bullied a lot in school, or my dad was quite sensitive, even when he was moved ashore to do a HR job for the majority of his working life. But we all kind of just sort of felt comfortable with each other. And in this essay, I actually start the essay with a little description of me being plagued with really bad nightmares about aliens because of watching alien movies when I was a kid, and my imagination just being too much for me. And you know, my parents didn't ever treat me like it was weird. They didn't take me to see a psychotherapist. They were just like, cool, you need to sleep in your sister's room for 6 weeks. That's normal, you know, in our house. So yeah, I think every family is weird, but I know how much sitting like with my mum and drawing, or sitting with my dad and like the hours that he put into either teaching me the stars or saying, hey, you need to listen to this new album start to finish, no breaks in between, come and chill out on the sofa and we'll put on all the twinkle lights, you know, which is quite an naughty thing to do. So yeah, I think families give us that affirmation, where we can't find it necessarily elsewhere, particularly if we don't have that kind of diagnosis. And sometimes I do wonder, what would it have been like if I'd had an early diagnosis or a childhood diagnosis? Would I have felt as empowered by my weirdness, you know? I think that's an interesting question.
Did you want to come in on that, Fergus?
Yeah, the issue of diagnosis and identification and all of the other ways of thinking about difference is a rich topic, eh? So I'm a bit older, I'm 47 now, so when I was a kid, I wouldn't have qualified for the diagnostic criteria for autism at that time. Maybe, let me think, yeah, probably around about the age of 15, they would have been broadened sufficiently for me to like get that diagnosis if that had come up. And yeah, would it have been helpful for me to understand? Probably not in the 1990s, but people, you know, kids who are realizing they're autistic now at least have some chance of connecting with the wisdom and joy of the autistic community.
Yeah, and I think that's something that comes across really strongly in both your essays, is the sense of empathy and community throughout both your essays in different ways, because also, Julie, you're really picking up on community within more than human as well in your piece. I really feel that it's really like reaching towards a really expansive definition of community. And obviously you mentioned Weird Pride, and you kind of set up Weird Pride in as partly like a special remembrance of your mum. And I'm wondering, like, could you say something, Fergus, about how monotropism maybe, like, how does that influence autistic community, and how important is autistic community for you?
Do you mean the idea of monotropism or the experience of monotropism?
I guess the experience, because I think what comes across both your pieces for me is how like special interests and monotropism can be a way of connecting with other people as well. And yet we're told, and we're often told like, oh, that's weird, or that's like, you know, it's strange to have interests. But actually, in my experience and what comes across in both your pieces for me is like that it's actually they can be really empathetic. Obviously they can be things you enjoy on your own too, and that's also great, but it can also be a key part of the autistic community. One very common thing in autistic communities is appreciation of info dumping. So I've been going to Autistic. Actually, I haven't been for a couple of years, but so Autistic is a yearly kind of conference / retreat by and for autistic people, which my mum went to from the start, even though she wasn't sure if she was autistic until the second or third one, I think. I first went there in 2016, and that was sort of what really got me connecting with the autistic community, I guess. Favourite part of that was always the lightning talks, where someone stands up and talks for like maybe 5-7 minutes about a topic of interest to them, and it's fantastic, because like the average autistic person will have at least 1 or 2 topics, often like quite a few, which they can hold forth about very enthusiastically and usually very interestingly, at least for a while. But having it limited to a known like length of time does save you from the problem of having to hear about model trains for half an hour with no way to escape. Not that there's anything wrong with model trains, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, so I mean, intense interests are absolutely a foundational thing of autistic experience and autistic communities. I guess I should say that monotropism also, it's not just about intense interests, it's about sort of multi-channel communication being difficult and things like that. So the way that autistic people tend to communicate works better for other autistic people than it does for most others. If someone is not gesticulating and using their face in a socially acceptable way and intonating right, is that even a word? You know what I mean. Then autistic people aren't bothered by that, and most people do seem to be. So yeah, I feel like it's a central part of why autistic people tend to get on better and communicate more effectively with other autistic people. It's not universal. Obviously, we're all different, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I completely agree, and I think a way that Joanna Lindbergh puts it in her book, Letters to My Weird Sisters, which I really recommend to anyone interested in reading about autistic feminism, is sort of like, yes, all autistic people are different, but it's like if neurotypical people or non-autistic people had a map that showed A roads and B roads, then maybe autistic people's maps would only show B roads. So it's kind of that facilitation of and ease of autistic communication with other autistic people. And Julie, you talk a lot in the pieces I said about your relationship with nature, I think, and I think again in quite an interesting way, where obviously nature writing I think more commonly refers to like nature on the earth, but why can't that also be celestial nature as well? And I think I was really interested to hear you talk about this as a stim, because I feel like that's a really interesting way that I haven't heard like use of the stim in such an expansive way before. So I was wondering, can you talk a little bit about your relationship with nature and maybe how you see yourself in community with nature as a neurodivergent person?
Thank you. Yeah, I definitely see celestial beings as pretty and as important and as valuable as all of the little bugs or flowers or whatever that I would love to observe as well. And yeah, I write about my connection to water as well, and to the trees. I'm a tree hugger, guys. Like they're my friends, and I talk about the stars being my friends as well. And I think it's a real sort of gift to me of being autistic, that we can have this really deep empathy and connection with things that are not human. And I think that can be sort of judged by everyone else or seen as weird, but I think that it's really only the last few years that autistic people have been writing about this more. There's been more autistic voices in the kind of specifically in the nature space as well. And I think that, in my personal experience, kind of understanding things on a spectrum of atoms and molecules and the kind of building blocks of life. Like I kind of look at the stars and I look at the sand on the beach and I look at myself, and we're, like I say in the essay, we're all made of the same things, and we have these same structural patterns in nature, these fractal patterns that run through us all the way from cosmic dust, right through all the leaves on the trees. They make the shape of the coastlines, and it's like we're layers of just patterns, piled up on each other, and it's a really beautiful thing, and it's a really lovely way, I think, to look at the world. And I know that I'm not unique in that perspective, obviously, and I think you share that with me as well. Read Elspeth's writing, please. And yeah, I think that it's really connecting to know that when you're outside on a walk or you're looking at the stars, there's this ancient world around you that you're made of. How can there be anything more connecting and grounding than that, I feel? And it's kind of weirdly, it's taken sort of beyond my diagnosis to kind of really understand that connection can be a stim in the way that it regulates me in a fractious state more than anything else that I can do. So if I'm having a pretty bad day, you can pretty much guarantee that I'll go out for 2 hours and I'll be hugging those trees and I'll be feeling the sand, and if it's winter I'll get my pass out in the garden and be watching the stars do their lovely carousel for a few hours. Sorry, I've kind of lost my train of thought now.
That was so beautiful. I think people were really resonating with that. It was so well. It actually brings me on to what I wanted to ask next, because it's really clear, I think, both in stargazing and monotropism and Superdrive at Home, that these are things that really interest you, right? Like, and you can tell when you're both speaking about the pieces as well. And I'm wondering, something I've heard from other autistic artists, writers and visual artists, and I've experienced it myself a bit, is it's great because you can pursue these things that you're really interested in, but for example, if you're asked to write about a certain topic that doesn't really interest you, that can be quite a struggle. So I'm wondering if that resonates with you, and also if you could talk a little bit more about your writing process. Fergus, so we come to you first.
I'm not sure I've ever been asked to write about anything that doesn't interest me.
That's good.
I have the advantage of being really interested in lots of things, but also the vast majority of my writing has been under my own steam, and I hesitate to use the word process. I'm not sure that fits. Yeah, when I write, it is often in sort of long bursts. I often have partially written drafts kicking around, which I'm still sort of noodling with in the back of my head somewhere, which I will probably return to eventually. Yeah, no, I spent years writing regularly for a website called Everything Too, which sort of started out doing something a bit like Wikipedia before Wikipedia started, but also took stories and poems and personal writing and things. And I delighted in writing about everything, you know, just a vast range of different topics, and getting the practice writing and, you know, feedback on what works and what doesn't. Yeah, I am prone to getting stuck sometimes and taking a while to finish things. It's interesting with this book, because yeah, they contacted, I don't know if this was the same for you, but they sort of wrote to me and said, hey, we're doing an international edition of this book and looking for writers in, you know, the UK or wherever to write about autistic experience. The deadline's in about 2 weeks. Are you going to be able to do that? It's like, I have no idea. And it turned out I could. Like, a few days later, I sort of sat down and just splurged it out. But yeah.
It sounds like, sorry, I was just going to say, it sounds like you're someone who has quite a few different writing projects on the go at any one time, or ideas percolating. Would that be right?
Yeah, usually a few. But yeah, I was just thinking back to having to write things for university and things where I was, you know, only moderately interested in it, and yeah, that was a problem.
And Julie, did you want to, does any of that resonate with you? As your writing process kind of completely different? Because something I find really interesting in my Substack is literally every neurodivergent writer I speak to, they have a completely different process, and I think that's really great because it shows that you could be someone who gets up at like 3 AM and writes for 5 hours. You could be someone who writes for 10 minutes every other day, and you can still do some writing.
Yeah, I love your Substack for that. Actually, I love reading about other writers' process, and I think it's amazing how we're all so different. I think it could be because I'm ADHD, so I found out I have combination ADHD as well as being autistic, and I think that it makes us kind of chameleons. Like, we're quite good sometimes at trying on different things to see, can I write about that? You know, like I've written political op-eds that have done really well, but I just ended up kind of thinking, I don't really fancy that. You know, I've critiqued art, and I've reviewed restaurants, and I've done all kinds of different types of writing. And I think, like Fergus, I kind of realised I have to do this for myself, because otherwise I will kind of burn out or lose interest, and I didn't want that to happen. And I think, yeah, like being able to express myself freely is definitely a motivator for me in my writing. And I think that because I have chronic illness as well, so I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, and all of it kind of can lead to days of fatigue or migraine or just extreme tiredness, whatever it may be. So I think because my life is so cyclical in terms of my energy and undulating, my writing process is affected by that unavoidably. So some days I can be really full of beans and really gunning for it, and I'll be like, oh, there's a bit of memoir, oh, there's a Substack post, you know, or here's a critical piece to go somewhere. In the last few years, a lot of my writing has been very kind of geared towards disability activism and inclusion, and the creativity I would say had sort of suffered. But then when it does come to things like this, where it's self kind of driven, if you like, it just normally just kind of flows. And interestingly, talking about the ADHD diagnosis, the lovely editor Jenna did get 2 versions of this essay that were quite different, and a sneaky little, can you just pick one please? Because I'm a tangential thinker having ADHD, and I really like both of them, and I didn't know which direction to take it, so bless her, she did a wonderful job and helped me to kind of really hone the themes that I was trying to kind of dig at. So I think when you're facing additional challenges and barriers with your writing, the support that you get from editors, my agent was great as well, and she saw probably the 3rd essay that you didn't see, that Jenna didn't see. But yeah, I think having people around you that understand the way that you think and the way that you work can be really beneficial.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds like the process, because obviously, I mean, we could be here for many hours talking about the barriers to access, in lots of different areas, but specifically in writing and publishing for autistic writers. But you both mentioned that you were commissioned for the international edition of Someone Like Me, and did that make the process a lot more accessible? Yeah, nods on both sides. Who wants to go first? Fergus.
Yeah, I mean, I've always found it almost impossible to pitch anything. I had ambitions of being a science writer for some years, and just kept not being able to get over that hump of writing to a stranger and saying, hey, here's a thing that you could give me money for. So that's been a massive problem for me. And yeah, mostly I just write for myself without expectation of getting paid. Or in some cases write for other people without the expectation of getting paid. Which is it's not great, and it's not uncommon, and it drives me kind of nuts that we as a society haven't found a better way of making sure that writers get paid for things that people want to read, and artists get paid for making art, and I mean, it's just a massive train wreck, isn't it? Being contacted and asked to write something, and offered money for it worked really nicely for me. Yeah.
Julie, does that chime with your experience as well?
Yes, exactly. Like you, I just hate pitching. I hate submitting. I hate querying. I didn't query. It was somebody, a lovely, my agent, who is just the best cheerleader and champion in the world. I love her. And she reached out to me, and we kind of known each other from, because I used to be a bookseller a few years back, probably like 13 years ago, and she remembered my manuscript, and she kind of reached out and was like, hey, what's going on? Like, are you represented? Why are you not represented? And I was like, apart from the fact I can't stand it. I'd only managed to query like a few agents, and I think that, as a writer, having to kind of have the energy to sit and build a spreadsheet. Who have I queried? Who have I contacted? What magazines am I going to submit to this month? What are their criteria? There's no standardization at all of what's required from a writer in the industry, and it changes per publishing house, per agency, per genre, and it's a lot. It can be quite overwhelming. So I feel like this for me has been really affirming and really motivating and empowering to just have somebody reach out to me and ask me to write made all the difference. And as you say, to be paid for that and to be able to do something like this as well, and to kind of have that support as an autistic person, as someone with facing multiple challenges, is just incredible. And I really wish that other publishers and agents and whatnot kind of took that approach. I don't know how we shift that, obviously, that's a big problem, but I think we're kind of slowly getting there, you know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so time consuming, and it kind of intersects with so many things like class, disability, neurodivergence, in terms of just not being able to have the time, energy, or resources to do that. And I mean, a piece that I really enjoyed in the anthology as well was Naoise Dolan's essay about how so much writing advice is very neurotypical. She talks about how specifically for young women and femme people there's like an expectation that you're always writing quite bodily descriptions. So she talks a lot about how she actually thinks it can be great to tell and be quite descriptive about how someone feels rather than showing through bodily descriptions in her own writing. And I'm wondering if you have any writing advice that you would give other neurodivergent people or other autistic people, even if that's just don't listen to neurotypical writing advice. Julie. Also, just to say, I'm going to come to audience questions in a minute, so just have a think of any questions you might have for Julie and Fergus.
I think advice. It's really hard. Don't lose hope. It's hard to say that because rejection sensitivity sucks and it bites really hard, and it can really put you off. There's been so many times just in the last 5 years alone that I have seriously been like this close to throwing in the towel and being like, this just isn't for me. I think, can resilience be learned? I think maybe. I think there's an element of getting yourself used to it, but I think that resilience comes from community. It's coming back to that place of knowing that there's other people going through it with you. So I think joining a writing group is brilliant. Joining a neurodivergent one is even better. Setting one up with your pals is great. You know, I do like a Friday afternoon sometimes online with a bunch of friends that really helps. You know, that's got that kind of body doubling aspect, and it's accountability as well. And it's, you know, it's really hard because every different organisation that's running any kind of opportunity for development is going to have their own newsletter, but it's really hard to stay on top of it. So like having a wider community, you kind of find that you find out about things through kind of the grapevine, don't you? But I think I would say just don't try to fit into whatever mold they're telling you need to be in. I think you just have to be yourself. And yeah, okay, you could argue that it's taken me like, I don't know, over a decade to get here, but like for me, I'd rather be here and be me and be really confident and happy in myself and my identity than like really struggling because I've tried to squeeze and bend myself like a pretzel into the wrong kind of shape, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Write what you feel like writing, but write. Like, I think not writing enough sounds silly to say it like that, but I think that's the biggest mistake that any writer makes, really. And neurodivergent writers, you're going to need passion to pursue it, so don't waste your time trying to write things that you don't really care about.
I think that's great advice from both of you. I mean, persistence, finding community, and writing what you actually care about, and not kind of contorting yourself in shapes or kind of excising parts of you to fit a different narrative. So thank you so much. I am going to come to audience questions now. So I think Christina will be able to let us know if we have anyone online who's asked a question. But yes, if anyone in the audience has a question, would you like to raise your hand for either Julie or Fergus or both? Yes. I'm just going to repeat that question for people who are, so I'll repeat each question for people who are on the live stream. So that question was just from an audience member asking if we had a favourite essay in the collection that was not, well, I didn't write one, but was not written by yourselves. Yeah, Julie, would you like to go first?
I have more than one.
I have to say, I loved Naoise Dolan's one that you just mentioned. Lucy Rose wrote Fish Girl, which is a really amazing extrapolation, would that be the word, on just the sensory overwhelm of being autistic. And there is the word Made Flesh by Alison Sampson really stuck with me as well, as did Autism Dark by Sarah Keane Judge. I'll stop there and let Fergus recommend some, but those are the ones that just blew my mind a little bit. No, it's not. Everyone's fine.
Yeah, well, they're all really good selections. I think I probably would have picked Fish Girl, the Lucy Rose piece. It's my absolute top favourite one. I thought that Bread Time was lovely. Who was that? Bread Time and Other Antidotes to Burnout by Erin Riley. Was just a really kind of, I don't know, cosy and evocative. I probably would have picked Stargazing as one of my favourites. Just overall, I'm slightly intimidated by the quality of the submissions. I feel like I'm in really good company here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's really hard to pick one piece because they're all very different as well. Some of them are sort of more, I guess, on the memoir and creative side. Some of them are more like exploring a topic or making or more drawing on research. So they're quite different. I mean, I did really love Naoise Dolan's piece, I think, because that one is called Show Don't Tell is Broken. Emotional depth doesn't have to mean flushed cheeks, and that was in addition to this international edition of Someone Like Me. And I really love that because I think I'm really interested in the kind of like autistic canon, autistic writing style, and like what that might offer, and kind of like received wisdom not fitting that, and that's helped my own writing. And I also enjoyed Building an Intersectional Legacy by Khadija Gabla. I'm not sure how to pronounce their name, but that was really interesting. And this book was originally published in Australia, as we mentioned, and that talks quite a lot about the Indigenous Australian experience of being autistic as well, and it was really interesting. So thank you so much for that great question. Does anyone else in the audience have a question? Or do we have any questions online, Christina? No, okay. Anyone else in the audience with a question? Yeah, hi.
If you were given another deadline of 2 weeks, is there a topic that you'd write about, I guess, again about being autistic, or your experience?
I'll just repeat the question for people online. So that question from the audience was just, if the writers were given another deadline of 2 weeks to write about something else around the autistic experience, around the autistic experience, what would they choose? Julie?
Can you see the fear in my eyes? Thanks for that. I think for me, it would be, because I toyed with the idea of trying, one essay is not really long enough to sort of describe the swing that happens between observing nature in the microscopic scale as well as the macroscopic scale. I was going to try and do a whole, hey, I've got a biomedical degree and I looked at cells and stuff under the microscope, and that's exactly the same as looking up at the stars through the telescope. But that would have been a far too long essay, so that would be my second one.
I'd be tempted to go for something that I've had half written in my drafts for the last 6 months at least, which is about how we divide these things up. So, working title, Lumpers, Splitters and the Problem of Neurotypes. We talk about being autistic, we talk about being neurodivergent, we talk about being or having ADHD, I talk about being monotropic, and weird and queer, and all of these things kind of intersect and overlap, and we talk about things as if they're categorical. That's just how language works, but things are hardly ever categorical in real life. Like almost everything, there's grey areas at the edges. So if I was commissioned in the way that Ellie described it, I would push the piece more in a talking about experience kind of way. which I wouldn't necessarily otherwise, but now that I'm thinking maybe that's a good angle to get through the rest of it.
Maybe we need a second anthology to have both these essays in it for Verve to publish next. We have time for one or two more questions if anyone. Yeah, hi.
So before you realised you were diagnosed with autistic, how did you subconsciously seek out the community?
Yeah, so that question was just before the writers were diagnosed as autistic, how did they perhaps subconsciously seek out a community that kind of turned out to be an autistic community?
I'm going to mention everything too here again, because it turns out that a gamified encyclopedia adjacent website starting in the late 1990s attracts quite a lot of autistic people. Very few of them knew it at the time, and I think, you know, I've stayed in touch with a lot of the people on the site, even though I haven't been regular on there for a long time. And I think probably at least 20 of the people that I knew through the site have later realised that they're autistic. But yeah, it does tend to happen with any kind of intense interest-based group. I have to say that Beltane Fire Society here in Edinburgh, I was at one point in a group with, I think, 4 other people who realised we were autistic within the next couple of years.
Yeah, very similar kind of experience for me, and that, it really took me until I was about 30 and was kind of going through a sort of massive, I don't want to say identity crisis because that sounds quite cliche, but I was doing a lot of soul searching and what do I want to do with my life and why have I never fit in and why do I always find life so hard? And I think I would use the phrase finding my people was what I kind of always used to say. I feel like, okay, now I finally found my people because they weren't in school and they weren't at uni and they weren't in the few years that I was miserable working jobs I wasn't happy in and it didn't fit me. And it was coming into the writing community here in Edinburgh was where I met the most people who were like me and I saw myself kind of reflected in, and it was through that I found, like, discovered that I was queer when I was 30 as well, or, you know, sort of pan-bi, whatever you want to call it, and kind of had to go through that, and then I was like, okay, there's this other thing, and then okay, I think there's this other thing. So I think the arts, right, must be quite, there must be quite a high prevalence in the sciences and in the arts of neurodivergent people. Because yeah, like when I kind of started really getting ingrained in this community, I was like, oh, here you all are. And it was the same, like I late diagnosed, but quite a few of my friends have ended up being diagnosed since I was, and I'm sure it's a ripple effect that continues on from that.
It's funny how it does tend to be something that even before you know, you're so like drawn to other people, because I feel like I'm like, how come everyone else I meet is a queer autistic vegan? Like, how does that happen? But it definitely does. That was a great question. Thank you so much. And just to wrap up, if I may sneak 2 questions into one, I'd love to, something I think that is really nice about the autistic community is how much we uplift each other. So I'd love to hear a recommendation from each of you for another book by an autistic writer or piece of art by an autistic artist that you've enjoyed, and then also if you wouldn't mind just telling us what you're working on at the moment as well. So if it's okay to wrap those questions into one, Julie, come to you first.
I think the writing that I've most enjoyed, is that the word? Seen myself? I don't know. Catherine May's Wintering, I know that was out a few years ago now, but that book I come back to every single year. There's something about that whole theme of the power of rest and giving yourself permission to have your winters wherever you need to throughout the seasonal calendar. You know, like that was the first time that I kind of felt like I wasn't a problem with my sort of fatigue and my issues with energy sometimes. The writing is beautiful. It's through nature writing as well, nature memoir. So I would recommend that, and also A Kind of Spark by Elle McNichol was a book that just completely, again, just made me feel so seen. It brought up so much from my primary school experience that I had forgotten actually and kind of blocked out because it was not the best. So it's a really powerful and neuro-affirming book. And on the ADHD side, a book called Earthed, which again is a nature memoir by Rebecca Schiller, is an incredible book. That was, again, the thing that made me go, oh, I've got ADHD, like 100%. There's no doubt in my mind when I read this book that I have that. So yeah, I think they would be my recommendations.
And what are you working on at the moment?
Oh yeah, so at the moment, so I'm working on, I finally actually have a little bit of time to be creative, which I'm not used to, because inclusion has sort of wound down a little bit now, which is exciting. So I'm working on some poetry that may or may not be themed around stars, unsurprisingly. And I've also been outlining a nature memoir around the grief and the bereavement of losing my dad the last couple of years. And I'm on submission at the moment with my young adult novel, which is a coming of age novel. So yeah, that's that.
Amazing, thank you. And Fergus?
So I like both of Pete Warmby's books very much. I think Untypical is probably the non-fiction book that I would most recommend to people who just want to get genuinely grounded in how autistic people understand autism. But what I want to talk about is all about special interests, which is lovely. So both of those, I think, I would recommend Corinne Davis's, I'm not sure how you say it, D-U-Y-V-I-S, it's a Dutch name, On the Edge of Gone, which is a sort of apocalyptic sci-fi about an autistic girl, which is just very sweet and uplifting, and not enough people have heard of it. And I'm working on. So I've got various books coming out, not books that I have written, books I have chapters in. So there are 3 books coming out in the next couple of months about neurodiversity in education. So I feel like promoting those is a bit of work. That counts. I'm finishing up a chapter about monotropism for a book about autism and well-being. And I'm about to start work on a second pair of animations about being autistic. So Thriving Autistic, an Irish autism organisation, commissioned Sunny and I and a bunch of other people to work on 2 animations which have just come out. Light bulb moments, being autistic, and
So you realise you're autistic?
yes, discovering you're autistic. Yes, so they're each about 2.5 minutes long. Just like accessible introductions to some of the things that we think are most important for people to understand about being autistic, particularly for people who are just starting to realise that they might be. And yeah, tentatively we are planning to work on 2 more of those. So that's exciting.
I watched some of the animations earlier today and they're really lovely. I really like the style and they're just really informative and nice and have a really nice energy, so I would highly recommend watching them to people. That is all we have time for tonight. I could definitely stay and talk to you for hours more about this book and about everything to do with neurodiversity and autism and writing and art, but sadly this is all we've got time for, and I'd just like to thank you as the audience. Thank you so much for being such a lovely audience, for the great questions, and to everyone who joined us online as well, and also to Lighthouse for hosting us and for being great and always supporting autistic writers, like very much so. We really appreciate that. And Julie and Fergus will be signing Someone Like Me now, so if you give us a moment to get over to the table, you will be able to get your book signed. Yeah, and I'd highly encourage everyone to get the book, to borrow it from their library. Lighthouse also have a pay it forward scheme, is that right? Yeah, so yeah, please do support autistic writers, and yeah, please join me in thanking Julie and Fergus for their insights and time tonight. Thank you so much.